How's it going, everybody, and welcome to the second episode of the blacksmith bench knife forged out of 8670 scrap steel that's just been laying around my shop. Let's take a look at where things left off. We got our point driven down. We have our blade material narrowed. Now this is already starting to look kind of like blade shape, but this side actually is going to become the spine of the knife, while this side, as it gets forged, will become narrower, which is ideal for our cutting edge. We want it to be nice and narrow. But as we hammer that edge material and narrow it, the rest of it has to go somewhere. So this point is actually going to kind of curve back up and straighten out this line as we forge in our edge material. Okay, so that's where we left it off. And now we're going to get into it. First thing we're going to do is we're going to start by isolating the tang. Let's get to it. I'm going to use my cross beam. I'm going to put that steel back in the forge, and I'm going to start upsetting, driving down, and isolating what will become the tang. What I do is I'll actually heat it up, and then I'll come in here and do some isolated hits, and I'll drive that down and make that notch, because what I want to start doing is develop. I got my model right here. Grab it real quick. I want to start developing kind of this flare along the belly side of the handle a little bit. I don't want to get too crazy because there's still a lot of forging that needs to be done before we start doing this flaring. I didn't explain this earlier. So when the peen is perpendicular to the hammer handle, that is called the cross peen because the direction of it is crossing the direction of the handle. So again, my cutting edge is the flat side. So I want to make sure the flat side is facing up. So we have our step knocked in. So what this is going to become now, like I said, as I start forging along the cutting edge, the tip is going to start curling back up as this material along the cutting edge spreads. Before we start forging on the cutting edge though, we're going to do some lengthening of the blade. The spine is pretty hefty right now, but instead of hitting it with the flat face, we're going to use our straight peen to help move that material directionally along the length of the blade. If you hit it with a flat face, that spreads the material in all directions. Versus an angle, the beauty of an angle peen, a peen in general, is that it directs the material in very specific directions, moves it in very specific directions. So that is what we're going to do next. This is how it's looking. Again, when you hit, especially with a very directionally oriented hammer, that is going to drive the material, and because it's thickest at the spine, when you hit it with the cross peen, boom, it's going to spread this way and that way. And so because it's thick, that material has to go somewhere, and that causes that tip to come down. So now we need to focus on the cutting edge, and that will kind of auto-correct itself. This is kind of an extreme preform. A preform is kind of something that people do to anticipate the upward sweep of the spine and the tip as you forge along the cutting edge. So I'm back to my dog head hammer. About to grab this piece of steel out. Here we go. necessarily the prettiest thing in the world right now, but we did help straighten that blade back out. So now I am actually going to go back to the spine and drive that down a little bit. So I still have some blade refinement. The reason I'm focusing so much on the blade is because before I start doing anything with the tang, I kind of want the blade to be done. I don't want to have to come back and do any touch up and stuff, because once we start focusing on the tang and moving material back there, kind of basically the last little bits and the last few steps. Something I like doing on these little blades is kind of making the spine nice and thin and helping to retain kind of like that brute to forge aesthetic. You can kind of see the way the light is reflecting off the blade. There's already kind of a transition there, and what I want to do is accentuate that. Something that has helped me kind of conceptualize and visualize what's happening, or kind of try to anticipate what's going to happen, is the material, when it's hot, it's in a plastic state that is very similar to like modeling clay. So if you can think, if you had a big old chunk of clay and you laid it down on top of this and you just took your thumb and went, what's going to happen, right? That clay, it's just going to kind of smush out. The same kind of thing is happening with the steel when you're hitting it hard and hitting it hot. You can work with a material called plasticine. It's kind of a heavier or denser modeling clay. It moves kind of similar. You can hit it with a hammer, but you have to hit it light because it's considerably softer than hot steel. But it's a good way, if you can get a hold of a chunk of that, to practice. And what you can do after you forge something out, you can smash it all back down and form it into a bar shape again, and just kind of practice again. Something you could do is make little hammers out of wood instead of out of steel. They're a lot lighter, and they will model steel hammers on hot steel. something you might have seen there is that the blade, the heel, I kind of focused a lot of force on the heel, and that helped drop it down really nicely. The way I did that is I only used kind of just this little corner of the hammer. Instead of using the whole face, I used just the corner to focus force. Boom, right there. And the same thing on this side. Boom, just that corner. Boom, boom. And so it's a lot more force on a very small area, and that helps draw this out. So I'm trying to do what is typically called forge to sharp. And basically, that means that the edge is so thin so that once it's heat treated, you basically don't have to do any grinding. Okay. Now I'm forging on the edge, but I'm just ever so gently forging on the edge because it's so thin, it's really easy to collapse that edge. I don't want that to happen. So again, I just do a couple hits and then I turn it back down. Refine it a little bit. So, something that you want to kind of think about and keep in mind, and I always kind of forget, even with as much experience as I have in forging, is that as the material gets thinner, it loses heat faster. So it doesn't really want to move when it's cold. So, just put it back in the fire, keep working it, work it hot. Kind of like this blade shape. Happy with that. Thank you everybody for watching episode 2 of the Blacksmith Bench Knife. If you have any questions, make sure to ask them down below in the comments. If you enjoyed it, hit that like button and of course, subscribe.